I don't remember exactly when the house stopped feeling like mine. One day, I just noticed my books weren't on the coffee table anymore, my drawings were gone from the fridge, and my favorite mug had vanished like it never existed. Regina didn't scream or throw tantrums. She didn't need to. She erased me gently, like a stain being scrubbed out of fabric. At first, it was small things. A suggestion here, a disapproving look there. Then, one morning, I realized I was asking for permission just to exist in my own childhood bedroom. She made it clear. I was a guest. No friends over, no photos on the wall, no key. "This isn't your place anymore," she told me once, her voice syrupy sweet, like she was doing me a favor by being honest. "One day you'll leave, and this will be ours." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded, and quietly folded my life into corners that kept getting smaller. But inside, I was awake, watching, remembering. Cataloging every shift in tone, every closed door. People assumed I was quiet because I was shy. Truth is, I was building a record in my head, a silent log of every moment I was told I didn't belong. I never decorated, never hosted a birthday, never even had a copy of the front gate code. But I noticed things, like how she changed the furniture but never touched the floorboards, or how my father never updated the deed after the renovations. They stripped my name from the walls. But not from the deed. Regina loved to play house. She filled it with white rugs no one could walk on, throw pillows no one could touch, and silence that wrapped around everything like plastic. My father, bless him, acted like nothing had changed. As long as dinner was hot and the bills were paid, he floated in his own world, blind to how I kept disappearing inside mine. I think part of him believed that love was compliance, that if I didn't complain, I must be fine. But love without space to breathe is just another way to suffocate. I used to sneak into the attic when no one was home. It was the only place that still smelled like before, like dust and old paper and safety. I'd run my fingers over the beams, whispering stories to the cobwebs, pretending the walls could still hear me. Sometimes I'd find one of my old toys, shoved behind a box, and it felt like proof that I'd existed. Like I wasn't crazy for remembering a time when my laugh didn't echo awkwardly down unfamiliar hallways. That attic held more of me than the bedroom downstairs ever did. The worst part wasn't being erased. It was how polite they were about it. Always smiling. Always saying the right things in front of others. I was never shouted at, just reduced. A shadow in a house that once held my whole world, and still, I kept my mouth shut. Because I knew if I pushed back too hard, they'd have one more reason to call me ungrateful. I wasn't ready yet, but I would be. That house held a secret, and I was already learning how to keep it safe. I used to lie awake at night, listening to the creaks in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint rustle of Regina's slippers. Each sound reminded me I was tolerated, not welcome. She never said it outright, but her every move screamed, "You're temporary!" And eventually I started believing it. Started wondering if maybe I really was just passing through, a guest waiting to be shown the door. My name wasn't on the mailbox, not on the family photo by the staircase, not on the spare key hanging in the kitchen drawer. But it was somewhere else. Funny how people forget what came before them. How they get so busy redecorating your life, they don't bother to check the foundation. My father built the walls, yes, but someone else had laid the ground. I learned early that people like Regina care about appearances, not documents. She focused so hard on replacing me in the present, she never asked about the past. That was her mistake. Because while she played hostess, I paid attention to the fine print. There's a strange power in being underestimated. They thought I'd stay small, stay silent, stay grateful for crumbs at a table I helped set. But even as they boxed me out, they never noticed the one thing they couldn't touch. I let them take down my photos, paint over my memories, close every door they wanted. But they never looked under the house. They stripped my name from the walls, but not from the deed. The call came on a Tuesday. No warning, no slow decline, just silence, then gone. One minute, I was making tea. The next, I was standing in the hospital hallway, staring at a curtain that didn't move. My father was never good with goodbyes, and in the end, I didn't get one. I stood there longer than I should have, waiting for something. Maybe a voice, a whisper, a last word. But death doesn't wait for closure. It just leaves a space where someone used to be. The funeral was exactly what Regina would have wanted. Polished, controlled, sanitized grief with catered sandwiches. She wore black like it was tailored to her soul, soaking in condolences like a widow in a spotlight. I kept to the back, where the air still felt real. People hugged me with pity in their eyes, like I was some distant relative who'd shown up out of obligation. I didn't correct them. Let them think what they wanted. After all, that's how it had always been. My absence served them better than my presence ever did. Then came the will. I sat on the edge of that lawyer's couch like a stranger waiting for a train that wouldn't come. He read through the papers, his voice flat and deliberate. And with every sentence, I felt myself disappear all over again. The house, Regina's, the savings, Regina's, the furniture, the car, even the damn garden tools, all hers. When he finished, she turned to me with a soft, venomous smile. You were never really part of this family anyway. And just like that, I understood. I hadn't lost my father that day. I'd lost him years ago. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in that lawyer's office. Not when I walked past the framed photo of my father and Regina holding champagne flutes like they'd won something. Grief hit me in quieter places. The back seat of the cab, the moment my key no longer fit the front door, the way I reached for my phone to call him and stopped halfway. But I kept my face still. I knew better than to show Regina anything that looked like pain. That's what she fed on, and I refused to give her one more bite of me. She followed me out to the porch, her heels clicking like punctuation behind me. You'll land on your feet, she said, faux sweet, resting her hand on the doorframe like it was already part of her. Strong girls always do. I wanted to say something, anything, but all that came out was silence. Not because I was weak, but because I knew what she didn't. While she counted her winnings, I held something else, something she couldn't see. And suddenly, walking away didn't feel like losing. It felt like loading the first arrow. People assume revenge is loud, dramatic, explosive, theatrical. Mine wasn't. Mine was measured, patient. I left without slamming a door, without demanding justice or raising my voice. That's not the kind of power I wanted. I didn't need to fight for the house. I just needed time. And time is generous to those who wait quietly with the truth in their pocket. I walked out in silence, but holding something Regina didn't know about. The papers were old. Faded ink, yellowed edges, tucked inside a folder so worn it barely held together. I found them years ago in a drawer my father never used, right after he married Regina. At the time, I didn't understand what they meant. Just names, signatures, dates. But I kept them. Instinct, maybe, or something deeper, something that whispered, hold on to this. One day, it'll matter. That whisper stayed with me long after I left the house behind. In the days that followed the funeral, I didn't answer messages, didn't return calls. While Regina preened over her victory, I did what I'd always done, watched, researched, verified. And when I held that document in my hands again, this time with the full weight of understanding, something inside me settled. It wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was something colder, clearer. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was remembering who I was before they tried to write me out. They thought they had erased me, that I'd go quietly like I'd always done. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. The land my feet had learned to walk on, the ground beneath every fight and meal and memory, it didn't belong to them. It never did. And while they basked in the house my father built, they never once looked down. I didn't fight for the house. I waited beneath it. My mother never made grand gestures. She didn't leave journals filled with wisdom or boxes of letters tied with ribbon. What she left me was smaller, but heavier. Before she passed, years before Regina ever stepped into our lives, she bought the land. Just the land. Quietly, legally, and in full. I remember the day she took me with her to the notary, her hand warm around mine, her voice firm as she signed her name. I didn't know what it meant back then, but she did. She knew enough to protect what couldn't be rebuilt. When I found the deed again, tucked behind a stack of tax receipts and warranty papers, my hands trembled. Her signature was still there, faded but unshakable, like her. And right beneath it, in a line I'd never noticed before, transferee, Isadora M. Duarte. Me. She had put it in my name. Not my father's, not theirs. Mine. The house may have changed. The people inside it may have tried to rewrite the story. But the ground? The ground had already chosen me, years ago, before anyone else had a say. I took the document to the land registry office myself. The clerk barely looked up until he typed the reference number. Then he blinked twice, sat up straighter, and said the words I already knew were true. This land is yours. Legally, irrevocably. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just nodded. Because the win wasn't in proving it. It was in knowing I'd never have to ask permission again. They built a life on my soil. And now, it was time to collect rent. I walked out of that building holding more than a paper. I held a bloodline, a promise, a quiet act of love from a woman long gone, one that outlived every cruel word Regina ever whispered through gritted teeth. My mother never raised her voice, but this was louder than any scream. She'd seen the storm coming before it formed, and while everyone else tried to build walls, she laid the earth under my feet, solid, signed, sealed. I wasn't just someone's daughter. I was the owner. The irony would have been delicious if it hadn't been so personal. Regina had spent years decorating, remodeling, repainting, convinced she was claiming something. But she never thought to ask what was underneath it all. That was her flaw. She thought foundations were metaphors. I knew better. I knew that real power doesn't sit in the living room. It lives beneath it. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need to explain. All I needed was patience and a copy of that deed. I made a few quiet calls. A lawyer I trusted. A title examiner. No noise, no drama, just steps taken in steady silence. Every confirmation was like a new breath in lungs I hadn't used in years. I thought of all the times Regina told me I didn't belong. I thought of every dinner where she talked over me, every holiday where I was cropped out of photos. She thought I was invisible. But paper remembers what people forget. And that land? It remembered me. I kept the documents in a plain envelope, tucked between the pages of a book Regina would never bother to open. There was something sacred about it. The way my mother's signature held up against time, how it stood quietly in a world that tried to forget her. It wasn't just legal proof. It was proof that someone once saw me, believed in me, and planted something just for me to one day find. A time capsule of dignity. A boundary that couldn't be bulldozed by bitterness or manipulation. People think revenge is fueled by anger, but mine wasn't. Mine was rooted in clarity. I didn't want what Regina had built. I didn't want to sit in her chair or sleep in her bed. I wanted her to feel what I felt all those years. Temporary, dispensable, like a visitor in a story already written without her. And the beauty of it was that I didn't need to raise my voice to do it. The soil beneath her was already speaking. I just had to let it finish the sentence. Every time I passed that house, I didn't look at the windows or the garden or the color she painted the door. I looked at the ground. Because that was mine. Quiet. Unmoving. Waiting. And when the moment finally came, when it was time to knock, I wouldn't need to bring noise or fury, just paperwork and presence. They built a life on my soil. And now it was time to collect rent. She didn't even hear the knock at first. Regina was in the kitchen, stirring her coffee, humming some off-key tune like she hadn't spent years sharpening her smile into a weapon. The sound came again, louder this time. By the time she opened the door, the court officer was already reaching into his folder. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here to serve an eviction notice." Just like that. Flat, legal, no room for confusion, no space for rebuttal. It hit her like a slap she never saw coming. She laughed at first. That brittle kind of laugh people do when the world stops making sense. "You must be mistaken," she said, her voice brittle but trying to stay composed. "This is my house." The officer pointed to the address, the parcel number, the court seal. "The house may be yours, ma'am, but the land isn't, and without a lease you have 30 days to vacate." The color drained from her face like water circling a drain. Suddenly, that house didn't feel quite so solid anymore. I didn't have to be there for the notice. I didn't need to watch her read it. But I was. Standing at the edge of the walkway, calm, present, steady. She saw me then, really saw me. For the first time in years, she had no script, no snide remark, no control. "Guests," I said softly, "don't get to stay forever." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. For once, silence was hers to hold. And I held the ground beneath it. Regina's calls started almost immediately. First to her lawyer, then to mine, then to anyone who'd still pick up when she dialed with panic in her voice. She must have flipped through every drawer in that house looking for something, a lease, a loophole, anything that could undo what had already been done. But there was nothing, because she'd never thought she'd need it. She was too sure, too entitled, too convinced that power came from occupancy, not ownership. She never imagined the floorboards under her feet could vote her out. I didn't gloat, didn't send messages, didn't make a scene. That's not how this part worked. This wasn't revenge soaked in rage. It was redirection. Regina had taken space that never belonged to her and built a throne on top of it. I simply reminded her the ground was borrowed, and borrowed things come due. 30 days. That's all the court gave her, a countdown she never saw coming. Every day that passed was another reminder that permanence isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn. I visited once during those days, not to taunt her, but to take stock. The garden was overgrown, paint chipping by the windows, and a pile of unopened mail sat under the bench. For all her control, she was unraveling. But I didn't speak to her that day. I just walked the edge of the yard, feeling the earth shift beneath my steps. There was no music, no applause, just wind, just truth, just a slow and steady return of what had always been mine. The day she left, I didn't watch her pack. I didn't need to. Some exits don't deserve an audience. But I was there when the last box was carried out, when the front door closed without ceremony, and the echo of it rolled through the yard like a sigh. She didn't say goodbye. Not that I expected her to. Regina wasn't the type to acknowledge defeat, only to rearrange the story later and pretend she chose to leave. But the court didn't care for her versions, only the facts. And the fact was, she was trespassing. She left behind fragments. A chipped vase in the kitchen, a silk robe hanging on the back of a door, ghosts in every corner. I walked through the house slowly, letting my fingertips trail along surfaces that once rejected my touch. It felt strange, standing in a place that had exiled me, only now with the silence on my side. I wasn't there to reclaim it. Not really. I wasn't interested in repurposing her leftovers. What I wanted was never the house. It was the air, the space, the right to decide what came next. I stood in the doorway one last time, my hand on the frame she used to lean against like a queen. And then I closed it, gently. Not out of nostalgia, but finality. I had no need to slam what was already sealed. I was once locked out. Now I held the keys, and the ground beneath them. She came back, of course, not with boxes, but with pleas. Regina stood at the edge of the property like someone who'd misplaced her crown and hoped no one would notice. "Please," she said, her voice suddenly soft, even trembling. "This house, it's all I have left." The audacity was almost impressive. For years she told me I didn't belong. Now she wanted mercy from the very soil she tried to erase me from. I didn't speak at first, just looked at her, really looked, and saw the hollow behind her eyes. She tried everything after that. Guilt, tears, thinly veiled threats dressed as emotional blackmail. "Your father wouldn't want this," she whispered, as if she'd ever truly known him. "You'll regret this someday." But there was nothing left in her voice that could move me. Not because I was cruel, but because I was done playing the role of the unwanted child hoping to be let in. She had turned me into a stranger. I had simply decided to agree with her. Now she was the guest. And I didn't owe her hospitality. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself. I just told her the truth, plainly and without cruelty. I'm not rebuilding this house for you. I'm rebuilding it for me. She looked around, as if realizing for the first time that it wasn't just about eviction. It was about erasure. The way she erased me. Only now, the roles had reversed. But I wasn't trying to get even. I was trying to be whole. And for that, some walls had to come down. The demolition started a week later. Neighbors stopped to watch, some with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. They couldn't understand why I'd tear it all down, the kitchen, the master suite, the carefully pruned garden. But what they didn't see were the years buried in those walls, the rooms where I was silenced, the floors I tiptoed across like an intruder. This wasn't just about structure. It was about memory, about making space where suffocation used to live. I didn't flinch when the roof came down. I exhaled. Every brick that fell felt like an apology I never got, a clean slate that came with dust and noise and liberation. And in its place, I started to design something new. No marble countertops, no locked doors, just warmth, openness, belonging. I didn't want a mansion. I wanted a home, one where the air didn't carry tension, where no one had to ask for permission to hang a photo, to laugh loudly, to be seen. I was building something I never had, not just for me, but for others like me. There was a space at the back of the property, under the old trees, where the sunlight filtered in soft and golden. That's where I decided the shelter would go, a refuge for girls who had been told they were temporary, who had been called guests in places meant to protect them. It wouldn't be flashy, but it would be safe, real. A place where no one could take the keys away. I wasn't just reclaiming land. I was planting legacy. I walk the property sometimes at dusk, when the sky turns the color of bruised lavender and everything feels both heavy and soft. The foundation for the new house is already poured, and the shelter's framing is going up fast. I hear laughter now. Not mine, not yet, but from the girls who've started to arrive, carrying their own quiet stories. They don't know everything I've lived, but they know what it means to feel like a ghost in your own life. And here, for the first time, they're seen. Sometimes I wonder what my father would think if he could see this. The house gone, the land reborn. Part of me aches at the thought, and part of me smiles. He built something for himself. I'm building something for others. That's the difference. That's the healing. Regina hasn't been back. I don't expect she ever will, but if she does, she won't find anger waiting. Just roots, walls that welcome instead of reject, and a woman who no longer needs to ask if she belongs. They thought taking away my name would erase me, that pushing me out would keep me small. But what they never understood is that I was never asking for space. I was growing into it, claiming it, making it mine. They treated me like I didn't belong, so I built something no one could take from me again.